tell you a quick story before our next guest comes on stage. In 2015, I was involved in a startup AFL club in Greater Western Sydney. Okay, we had a group of 34 18-year-olds merged together, plunked in Western Sydney to play the game of AFL. AFL is not played in that area, so it would be, I don't know what it would be even like, but it's just simply not played in that area, period. The big thing, what we did around that time, those 18-year-olds were a highly anxious group of players. A lot going on, paid a lot of money, and a lot going on off the field. High-level draft picks, and would get together and are all high achievers. So our coach did something different. So 11 years ago this was, okay? They were fit, they were physical, they had good decision makings, were on the right track, but we wanted an extra edge. He brought in a mindfulness coach at that time and concentrated on breath work. And some of us coaches at the time were like, gee, you know, I've been breathing 40 years and all this sort of stuff. I'm fine, I don't need it. But when we actually sunk into it, because it was led by our coach at the time, and we delved straight into that mindfulness aspect, we wrote it into our program in pre-season, 12-week structured, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, specific breath work and meditation every afternoon. We suddenly felt fresh, more alert. And not only that factor, but our performance rate started to go like this. Not just because of the breath work, but I am absolutely, certain that it was a contributing factor to ground those boys a little bit better, to give them more clarity and make them less anxious. So this next session, we're going to jump into that a little bit, okay? We're going to jump in and practice it. So we all have breathed for a long time in our lives, but have we use your breath with purpose? That's the big thing I'd really want to ask of this session. The individual I'm going to invite on this stage now, so Kristina Centenari, come on onto the stage. Welcome. She is a night coach. She is a performance coach. She's working with some of the world's greatest athletes, former tennis player, which you'll delve into that story a little bit, I know, today, and is using her performance mindset to bring it to real life. Working for Nike, this isn't a product pitch or anything like that. It's really practice, and it's something that's resonated with me. When I saw it being added to the agenda, I said, that is a point of difference. That's something that you can take home to your athletes or individuals. I'll pass it over to Kristina, okay, and it's all yours.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you. Also, I just love the way Nick says Nike. Hi, guys. One more, and then you get to have dinner. And I'm hearing there's tequila tonight, so bear with me. My name is Kristina. I am a strength and performance coach in New York City, and I've been coaching with Nike for just over 5 years. As mentioned, I was a Division I college tennis player, which I'll get into in a moment. But I have been studying, thank you. I've been studying respiratory health, nervous system work for around the last 5 years. And there's a reason for that, but long story short, a couple years ago I went to Nike. We do this summer training program. Every summer it's called Project Moonshot, where we take 100 to 200 runners, depending on the year, all levels from elite athletes going for like Olympic trials times to kind of couch to 5K athletes. And I said, let me design a 16-week mental conditioning curriculum to go alongside our run training. Now, I call it mental conditioning because if you walk into a room in New York City with a bunch of type A runners and you say breath work, you're immediately going to get shunned out. So this work has to do with the breath, and it has to do with the nervous system. And I've been doing it with Nike every summer for the last 3 years or so, and we have had the highest numbers of New York City Marathon PRs in the last 3 years. So this changed my life. It changed my approach to coaching. It changed my athletes' approach to the way that they kind of move through life. And before I go on and explain sort of the whys and hows, I want us to feel this, because this is something you really have to feel in your body in order to buy into it. That's how I bought into it. I walked into my first breathwork class 2021, and I was like, I was just not happy to be there. Just the word breathwork. I was like, I don't need this. I walked out and I was like, wow, okay, this is the missing piece. I do breath work with my athletes and with some of my people in sort of like more, organizational corporations, because oftentimes when you ask somebody to sit down and meditate, it's much harder to control the state of your nervous system with your thoughts. In fact, it's almost impossible, but you can do it with your breath. So we're going to spend the next 10 minutes or so learning how to breathe better. Most of the people in our world today don't know how to breathe that well, and there's a reason why levels of anxiety and depression are continuing to go up. Actually, 3 out of 4 people with generalized anxiety disorder have dysfunctional breath patterns, but we are usually not looking at the breath first. So all of this to say, let's take a moment here to relearn how to breathe. So wherever you are now, if you have a pen in your hand, finish what you're writing, and then let that go. And then you're just going to find the back of your seat with the small of your back. So you might have to scoot back just a little bit. All right, and then from there, you're going to find your feet flat on the ground. And then before we do anything, manipulating the breath, thinking about anything different, I want you to just close your eyes and notice what's going on now. And specifically, notice what's happening when you inhale. Where is it happening in your body? Does it feel like a short inhale? Does it feel like a longer inhale? And I can almost guarantee, and at some point I need some contact, so I can't see all of you, but I can see a lot of us in where we're taking this inhale, and like most, it starts up in the chest. And so, number 1, we want to be aware of that. This is called breath awareness. Where am I breathing right now, and what does it feel like? That is a direct response to the environment that you're in. Number 2, we're going to start to pull that inhale down a little bit lower in the belly. So I invite you to take one hand, place it on your belly, one hand, place it on your chest. All right, this gives you some neural feedback. Where is my breath happening right now? If you've never done this before, you're going to need a little bit of feedback. On the next few inhales, I want you just to inhale through your belly. So as you take in air through your nostrils, you'll feel that hand on your belly expand outward. And then exhale, let it go. Try that again. Inhale, belly only, fill 360 degrees. It starts to wrap around your obliques, around to your low back, and then let it go. Now on this next one, let's take that air. Let's expand through the belly first, the chest second. So full exhale right here. Inhale, belly expands with air, fill up. Chest expands second. Nose or mouth, let it go. And again, see if you can pull it a little bit slower here. Inhale, belly expands first. Chest second. Let it go. Two more like that. Inhale, belly, chest. Notice if the air goes up into your chest, if your shoulders start to shrug up to your ears, let them go. Last one, inhale. Slowest one of the day right here. We breathe about 22,000 times per day, and you've probably not noticed one of them until now. After that last exhale, keep your eyes closed. You can just drop your hands into your lap now. And we're just going to spend a couple seconds here, but I want you to remember that organization of inflating the belly first, the chest second, and then smoothly letting it go. Feet are flat on the floor. Shoulders drop away from the tips of your ears. Let your eyebrows relax. A lot of us are familiar with this cadence, but our brain likes rhythm, it likes pattern. So we'll fall into this together. It's a box breath, right? That's 4 seconds on the inhale, a 4-second hold at the top, 4 seconds to exhale, 4-second hold at the bottom. All right, so wherever we are right here, take a big breath. Inhale, belly, chest, nose or mouth, let that go. Seal the lips. Inhale, 4, 3, 2, 1, hold, 4, 3, 2, 1, exhale, 4, 3, 2, 1, hold. And again, inhale, 4, 3, 2, 1, hold. Exhale, 4, 3, 2, 1, hold. I'm going to give you about a minute to continue this on your own. 4 counts on the in, 4 on the hold, 4 on the out, 4 on the hold. And then as we move through this, let's see if we can expand the volume, not the intensity, but the volume. Inhale, fill the belly more. Think 360-degree core canister. That air wraps around, chest second, hold. And then let it go for 4. Good. Another 2 like that, same thing. Every inhale, you're going to see if you can fill up 10% more. Notice if when you try and do more, immediately you think more intense. Intensity tends to lead to tightness, strain. So how relaxed can we stay while we fill up 10% more? And then after that last exhale, come back to some cadence that feels normal to you, natural to you. Good. Noticing if there are any changes in your body right now. For some of us, we might be feeling nothing. Nowhere to go, nowhere to be. For some of us, we might be feeling actually a little bit anxious because maybe we haven't relaxed in like 10 years. All right, wherever you are, just let that sit for one more moment. And then slowly here, you can let some light back into your eyes. Maybe flutter open the eyelids gently. If you feel really good, just take your time. You don't have to open your eyes right away. So I can guarantee that we feel a little bit different than we did about 7 minutes ago. You look different, the vibe in the room is different, and I want you to just note this feeling. Right? I'm not going to make you guys do this, but with my athletes, I make them shout out a word to describe how they're feeling. Calm. Sometimes it's a little bit more anxious, and we'll talk about why that is. Clear, light. These are some of the words that often come up, and I always say, wow, can you imagine starting a race feeling this way? So if you haven't opened your eyes yet, come back into the room, maybe shake out the arms a little bit, give yourself some neck circles, wake yourself back up. And then I want to take you on a little journey. Let's see, this is about 13 years ago. On a park bench in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Anybody been there? Or from, yeah, nice. Or from there? Yeah. I know Durham's right there, so a lot of us are here. So Winston-Salem, North Carolina, it's October, it's the end of October. It was the end of my fall season. I was 19 years old. I had just gone back to play at my dream school. All I wanted when I was a teenager was to play ACC tennis. That's all I wanted. I had no other goals, potentially to play pro after. But I had made it there. And I'd overcome a lot of adversity. I struggled with constant injuries in juniors. I was also a complete head case. Somehow, I made it to my dream school against all odds. And now I'm sitting on this park bench in October, and I'm wondering why I am so unhappy. My freshman year didn't go like I thought it was going to go. In a couple months after I realized I wasn't going to play in the lineup, I lost 30 pounds that I did not have to lose. And I started feeling less and less like myself. Went home for the summer. Parents begged me not to go back. I said, no, I can do it. It's going to be better. It's going to be better next year. So I go back sophomore year, and it's worse. So I'm sitting on this park bench. It's the end of fall season. I had played horribly. No way I was making the lineup in the spring. And the walls just came crashing down. I remember leaning over, kind of like sitting like this, leaning over, and all of a sudden my chest got really tight. My stomach just flipped inside out. There was this buzzing between my ears that was so loud and incomprehensible, but I could not get rid of it. And I felt like I was suffocating. That day I called my parents. I said, okay, I can't do this. Wake me up. Never went back to that school, never played tennis again. That was the end of my career. Now, kind of sad, but it is why I do what I do today. Massive silver lining. As with most young life crises, it leads you into your purpose. I spent the next 10 years or so coaching. That athlete with no closure to coach pipeline is strong, all right? And that's exactly what I did. I moved to New York immediately. I was like, this is what I want to do. I'm not sure how it looks like, but people pay a lot of money for things in New York, so maybe I can make some money there. I spent the last decade in New York, and I was coaching at all levels, from pro athletes, college athletes, celebrities. I recently just had a 75-year-old with a hip replacement who's trying to run Chicago this fall. And I thought my purpose was to get people really physically strong. I was also very passionate about training. But over the last decade, I realized something doesn't feel right. Something is missing here. There's a commonality between all of these populations that I'm coaching. And it's that these are high achievers who live to achieve something and acquire something, and then they do it and they're still not happy, right? And so the space I'm mostly in right now in New York, I'd call it, it's like a hybrid between wellness and performance. And if you look at this graph, it's pretty insane because controlled annual growth rate in global wellness right now is around 7 trillion. It's a massive number. There are a lot of resources going into wellness in our world. By 2029, it's going to be above 9 trillion. So why? Why are depression and anxiety symptoms skyrocketing, especially among 18 to 24-year-olds? As I told you before, a couple years ago, I was forced into a breathwork class. My eyes were rolling in the back of my head. I was like, I don't want to be here. How is this going to make me a better athlete or coach? It was in that class that something crazy happened. I ended up holding my breath comfortably for almost 3 minutes after a series of breath patterns and different cadences and frequencies. I held my breath for 3 minutes comfortably. Didn't freak out, no air hunger. It's like, wow. First initial thought was, how could this help my athletes? So I did a deep dive into everything respiratory health, everything nervous system work. And as I said in the beginning, this is truly what changed and shifted the trajectory in my career and the way that I coach athletes, approach performance. And I can tell you that little Kristina, 19 years old, on a bench, this is what she needed. So we're going to start with the nervous system today. I'm going to give you guys just a brief overview. I know a lot of you are very familiar with this already in the room, but it doesn't hurt to go over it. Specifically, autonomic nervous system. So your autonomic nervous system is that part of your body that you can't control, right? You can't will your heart rate down. You can't decide your cortisol levels to be lower. You can't think yourself into not sweating. These are all things that are happening out of our control. And these are things that are interacting with our world before our thoughts do, all right? They usually go below the level of consciousness, and then what comes up, if you can imagine that awesome iceberg image that Dr. Thorpe had earlier, below the level of consciousness is the cortisol, it's the heart rate, it's the blood pressure, it's all this autonomic nervous system response to a stressful environment. And then that iceberg that we see above water level, those are the negative thoughts that come from that. So if we take this top-down approach to mental health, right, if we try and get our kids and our clients to think their way out of a dysregulated nervous system, where 90% of the information coming up from the underwater, right, the high heart rate, the blood pressure, is telling the brain, no, you're not okay, it's not going to be that effective. When I was in college, saw many different therapists, none of whom were that effective for me specifically. And it was because my nervous system was in shambles. Remember, I had lost 30 pounds. I probably slept 6 hours a night, right? And as a teenager, that's not a setup for success. So we can't control our nervous system with our thoughts. However, we do have one tool with us at all times that acts as a direct line of communication with this thing, and it's our breath. Your breath is a direct line of communication to your nervous system. In short, the faster and the choppier you breathe, the more sympathetic drive. All right? A little bit of an oversimplification, but we're going to leave it here. The slower you breathe, the longer you exhale, you enter into a more parasympathetic state. Now, there's not one or the other. This thing is a spectrum, okay? There's a lot of misinformation now that I see. My world is largely around social media, and I see 5 ways to regulate your nervous system, and it's just, it's not helpful because it's not accurate enough, right? You have to look at this thing as a scale. sympathetic, parasympathetic, but there's a lot of gray area in between. And when we learn to control our breath, we learn to turn the dimmer up or down on that area in between. So, just call it out. What do we think the primary driver of our breath is? I knew somebody would actually get it right in this room. Yes, carbon dioxide. So, most people think it's oxygen, right? Oh, we need more oxygen. But the primary driver of taking a breath is carbon dioxide accumulation. Now, when I was doing this, and when I work with a lot of my athletes, again, like, you want them to buy into this stuff in order to do it, and a lot of them are going to be like, well, how does your breath communicate with your nervous system? That sounds good, but how does it actually work? So now we're going to talk about the why. Primary driver of your breath, carbon dioxide. We can feel it right here. If you guys sit up nice and tall, you take a big breath in and you hold for as long as you can. Go ahead and do that now. Hold. And then it's not a competition, but raise your hand when it starts to get a little bit uncomfortable. Yeah. Nice. It's like whack-a-mole. Yeah. Okay, that was around 20, 25 seconds. Some of you 30. A really healthy, calm place to be, a place where it shows me that you're in a calm state, is around 40 seconds. All right? So I often use breath holds with my athletes as soon as they walk in the door to just measure, like, where are we today in terms of arousal sensitivity? Really simple, effective way to do this. And I highly recommend doing it as soon as they walk into the gym or as soon as they walk onto the court. All right? You don't want to start a lift or a practice when somebody's nervous system is completely in shambles. You don't also want them to feel like they're going to sleep, but that's where this dimmer comes in. Right? And that's where we start to learn to control the breath, and we start to really use this as a hack. So, carbon dioxide, that's that feeling of air hunger. Put a pulse oximeter on somebody having a panic attack, and their oxygen is not depleting, right? But their carbon dioxide levels are accumulating. So what that does is it sends this signal to your brain that you're in danger. Part of your brain that receives this signal, we call it the false suffocation alarm. It's not actually called that, but that's an easy way to understand it. This is a prediction error because your brain thinks you're running out of oxygen, but you're not. And so we become very sensitive to this feeling of carbon dioxide accumulation when we breathe 22 times per minute every day, super shallow, super choppy, super fast. This morning at breakfast, where's Kieran? Kieran was talking about the nose tape and the mouth tape that he wears to sleep. And there's a lot about that. Like, there's a lot of trendiness about nose tape and mouth tape and athletes and blah, blah, blah. So it's just a lot of noise. But at the end of the day, this is the takeaway. When you have somebody who's a mouth breather when they're sleeping, that person is probably waking up just a little bit more anxious because they just spent 6 to 8 hours, all right, reducing the tolerance that they have to this feeling. So that's why that's important. And that's why nasal breath training is also really important, and we'll get to that in a moment. This is a little diagram I draw for a lot of my people who are visual. It's a little bit confusing right off the bat, but essentially when we can understand that anxiety is physiological, it makes it tangible, right? When you can really teach somebody that how they're feeling right now is not this elusive monster under the bed, but it's starting from the bottom up, and we can actually control it with the right tools, this is empowering. Anxiety starts with an environmental stressor. I had a couple of years ago somebody ask me to work with an NBA player who was struggling with a lower limb injury, return to play guy, also struggling with some anxiety. And we're in the gym and we're at a point now where he can do some single leg hopping, like there's enough tolerance for that. And every time I would ask him to do it, right? So the environmental stressor here, among many other things, is his injury. His brain is anticipating the pain. So I'd ask him to start hopping on one leg, and immediately, if you looked very closely, this is what would happen first. And I'm going to exaggerate it slightly just so that you can see me from up here. And then he would start hopping. Now this guy's 6'5". It's a long way between the center of his ears and his lower limb. And so he doesn't trust himself. He hasn't built that trust yet with himself. Tissue tolerance is there. Nervous system capacity is not there yet. So we spent about 25 minutes in that session breathing, and then I asked him to do the same thing, just hop one more time on that foot. He starts, body stays calm, I could see face stays calm, and he's hopping on one foot. So this graph is essentially showing you, or this diagram rather, anxiety starts with an environmental stressor. The research is a little bit different, contextually different. What changes first, a shift in your body or a shift in your breath? Whatever it is, it's a close 1-2. The important thing to know is that as soon as that happens, that sends a signal to your brain that you're in danger, which then leads to the thoughts that we acknowledge on the surface, which is like, I'm not ready to hop on one leg. What if I tear this thing again? What if I don't get back to where I was before, right? All of that is what we're working with at the top level. Everything below it is breath and nervous system. You can also take this and apply it to where we are today. Like, this is a social context. Some of us struggle with social anxiety. The next time you talk to somebody you don't know or do know, notice if your breath changes. Some of us might be holding our breath talking to somebody new. Some of us might be kind of breathing fast and shallow. And then all of a sudden you leave that conversation and you're like, oh God, did I sound stupid? Like, does that person like me? You know? So a little bit more applied to a performance context. Within the performance realm, and I've worked in a bunch of different spaces, breath training is low on the list of priorities, if on there at all, which is nutty because 90.6% of competitive athletes, and that's high school, college, pro, have dysfunctional breathing. And what this looks like here, I know that left side photo is a little bit hard to see. What I really want you to focus on is what's in the circle. If you put nervous system aside for a second and you just think about exercise, think of a runner, all right? A runner increases metabolic demand. What happens? They have to open their mouth to offload more CO2. Now, when we do that, that also means oxygen delivery is not as efficient, which means we enter anaerobic state pretty quickly. Maybe more quickly than we want to because we haven't trained any sort of gears in our breath. Put nervous system back on the table. That's all happening with your athlete running 400s now. They start to lose some mechanical quality in their upper body, and then the negative thoughts start to come in. I was faster last year. I should be stronger than this. I have a race next week. I'm not good enough, et cetera, all right? So the important takeaway here is that dyspnea, that means kind of like shallow, fast breathing, when that goes up, performance goes down. Inverted relationship. How we see that is negative thoughts. They'll start to spiral. How we interrupt that, breath training. One of my favorite studies, just to kind of like cap off the power of carbon dioxide and how this stuff just starts from the neck down. This guy, Justin Feinstein, clinical neuropsychologist, one of the leading researchers in this space when it comes to anxiety, when it comes to PTSD research. He did one of my favorite studies where he took this woman with very, very unique situation. She had something like double lesions on her amygdala. In short, she did not feel fear. For 30 years, she had never felt fear. So he took her into the lab and he tried to get her to feel fear from showing her like the scariest of images, the scariest movies. He even did a simulation where she had a snake in her hands, nothing, no activation. And then he put a gas mask on her. He left the oxygen levels exactly where they were, and he turned the carbon dioxide up just a little bit, like 2% or something really low like that. She had her first panic attack in 30 years, ripped the mask off, and said that was the scariest experience I've ever had. And what this does is it shows that fear does not start in the brain. Your athlete getting ready to compete who is nervous, all of those nerves start in the body and present themselves in the brain. So we have to address what's going on from the neck down. When we do this, when you can get your athlete to, number one, be aware of how their breath reflects their nervous system state, and number two, understand how they can control the dimmer on that state, you give them the power to take control of their own narratives, right? 19-year-old Kristina on the bench thought she was broken. The world told her she was broken, that she needed to be fixed. But if I had understood, if I had the tools and the language to understand breath and nervous system, that story in my mind would have looked a lot different. It probably would have said, you know what? Your nervous system is responding exactly the way it's supposed to right now under tremendous stress. What can we do to move forward? Aaliyah Crum, she's a researcher out of Stanford. She's one of my favorite to follow. She does a lot of work on cognitive reappraisal, a lot of work on what she calls stress optimization. So this is essentially saying, like, when we feel stress in our body, when we feel nerves in our body, I was kind of nervous before coming up here, I'm not gonna lie. You either tell yourself, this is my body getting prepped to crush it, or I'm not ready, I'm not gonna crush it. And she's actually done research with athletes specifically, taking athlete A, athlete B. They feel the exact same way in their body, but one of them says, no, this is my body getting me ready to compete. I'm prepared. And then the other says, what if I'm not good enough? Very different performance outcomes, as you can imagine. So physiology sets the tone for psychology, right? We were chatting about earlier how there's really, we want to find a better term for mental health, but it's tough. And if I had to take a stab at it, I'd say nervous system literacy, right? It's being able to understand what's going on from the neck down in order to then change the narrative, in order to empower you to control the story that you want to live your life with. When we talk about mental edge, that's what it is. Novak Djokovic talks about this a lot, right? Everybody feels nerves, including him. Everybody gets frustrated after they miss a point. Everybody feels some type of way after they do something that maybe is not up to par of what they wanted. It's how fast you can recover from that state. So my brother, kind of my hero. Both my brother and my sister also played college tennis. Very successful careers. None of them had a little mentee be like I did. Older brother played and then went on to play 5 years on the tour, and then went on to be, I believe, the youngest Ivy League tennis coach ever. He's truly one of the best coaches that I know. And I asked him a little while ago, I said, in a sentence, what do you think one of the limiting factors is across the 5 years you were coaching at Dartmouth with your guys in terms of their mental health and kind of getting past some of these barriers? And he said, in short, it's everything going on off the court. My guys played a lot better after exams. They played a lot better after spring break. Sometimes, you know, things at home seep in, but it's everything going on off the field, off the court. it's life. When you get these people to talk about their mental health, they talk about their life. So if we can empower them to understand how their breath shifts with their state, how they have total control of their breath in order to gain better control of that state, and how they can shape the story they want, you become a coach that teaches an athlete how to bring the best out of themselves. And that's a great coach. Good coaches, you bring the best out of the athlete. A great coach, you teach that athlete to bring the best out of themselves. So back on that bench, Winston-Salem, 19 years old, fully hunched over, felt like I was suffocating. I'm doing everything that I'm doing now for her. Because when I was in college, we didn't have NIL stuff. We barely had social media, all right? So when I see people look at a lot of these and think that's what we need to fix, I'm like, we're sort of shooting at the wrong target here, right? I still went through all of this stuff without that. That accentuates everything. But we have to get really, really specific about how we approach mental health and nervous system literacy and empower our athletes to shift their narratives. That's all I got for you today.
Excellent. Stay here for a second, okay, because there's a couple of things that I want to unpack a little bit, because I think to your point, the best coaches can be therapeutic in their approach. They don't have to be therapists, but they can have simple tools to understand and manage and recognize signs of mental health or mental illness if it happens to go that way. A terminology that we brought into Australia, I was involved in a program, and Nick might be aware of this. It's called the Tackle Your Feelings program. Ireland Rugby do it. We did it in AFL, Australian Rules Football, and it was to give coaches the tools. So the practical tools that you've just given there, if you can take them away and instill them, and it might be for some people, it may be for not, but there is other tools out there as well to make you therapeutic in your approach, to deal with your athletes, to have better, full, meaningful conversations so you understand your athletes, so you become a better coach. You've got the science, you've got the practicality, you've got the fitness side of things. The other thing that we went down the route of calling it was not mental health, but mental fitness. Because athletes responded because they knew what physical fitness was, but they couldn't unpack what the signs of mental fitness were. Because we can see an ankle roll or an ACL or a hamstring or something, but we can't see what's going on inside in your head when you're sitting on the bench.
Yeah.
It's invisible.
Yeah.
So, beautiful story. Thank you for sharing that today. I will open it up to questions. If anyone has any questions, like we do have a little bit of time. So if anyone wants to ask, if not, you're going to be around tonight as well.
I will.
You're coming to dinner. So if anyone wants to have a conversation, happy to have those conversations in private if you so-called wish. Thank you for leading this session this morning, by the way. I did about 20% of it. I won't do any of it tomorrow because it's a 5K run. And I did get a hip operation. I'm not the 75-year-old that you're coaching, by the way, but I do relate to the story that you told about the calf, because I think that you were talking about Jack before. He could have done with some breathwork if the other Jack was going to pick him for this weekend's session. Okay, so thank you for your approach and all this. Any questions, anyone? Yep, we got one over here. Ryan. Sorry, Nina, you got to scurf across the floor. Just give it 5 seconds and she'll be there. And by the way, Kieran, guys, if you don't know Kieran, we would love Kieran to wear the breath tape during the day as well, but he takes it off, unfortunately.
Awesome, thanks. I can tell my breath is short now because I don't like doing this. Any advice during competition? Is it that box breathing? Is it? I guess anything you got during sport.
Yeah, really good question. And oh my goodness, I could talk about this probably for a full 24 hours, but that's a whole nother sort of like training system. I would say, in short, again, the number one thing you want your guys or girls to think about is, did their breath just change, right? So like, if they're out on the field or they're running 400s, Like, is there a noticeable difference in the way that they're breathing compared to the first 5 minutes of play? There probably will be, because again, like, that metabolic demand is going up, but just noticing that in and of itself, with them understanding that, okay, my breath reflects my state, they'll have the ability to maybe take a longer exhale. And that is what I tell a lot of my runners is, if you can, just come back to a longer exhale. There's a thing called respiratory sinus arrhythmia, and it's essentially when you inhale, your heart rate goes up. When you exhale, your heart rate goes down. That happens at every moment of the day when you're breathing. And so when you're out there and you're in competition, if you can squeeze out some longer exhales, that's a really good place to start.
Great answer. Good question, by the way, as well. Anyone else? Any other questions? That's cool. As I said, Kristina is going to be around for this evening, and if you want to have a chat or a conversation around this topic, I'm sure you'll be open to answering any questions. So, again, round of applause for Kristina. Thank you. Okay, take this. Is this your phone? Cool. Okay.